The studio lights were blazing hot on the evening of September 24th, 1971. The Dick Cavett Show was taping in front of a packed audience in New York City, and the air was thick with anticipation. This wasn't just another late-night talk show. This was history about Untold. Muhammad Ali, the most controversial athlete in America, sat in one chair. Dean Martin, Hollywood royalty and symbol of traditional American values, sat in another. And between them, tensions that had been building for years were about to explode. America in 1971 was a nation tearing itself apart. The Vietnam War had divided the country into warring camps. On one side stood those who believed in unwavering support for the troops, for the government, for America right or wrong. On the other stood protesters, draft resistors, and those who believed the war was immoral and unjust. Muhammad Ali had become the face of resistance. For years earlier, he'd refused induction into the U.S. Army, citing his religious beliefs and moral opposition to the war. He'd been stripped of his heavyweight title, convicted of draft evasion, and banned from boxing during what should have been the prime years of his career. To many Americans, Ali was a traitor. To others, he was a hero, but nobody could ignore him. His case had become the defining moral question of the era. Was it patriotic to serve your country, even in a war you believed was wrong? Or was it more patriotic to stand by your principles, even when the cost was everything you'd worked for? Dean Martin represented the other America, the crooner, the movie star, the embodiment of mid-century American cool. He was Sinatra's wingman, the Rat Pack's charming drunk, the man who made everything look effortless. But beneath the laid-back persona was a fierce patriot. Martin had never served in combat himself, but he'd grown up in an era when duty to country was sacred, when you didn't question your government, when real men answered the call. The confrontation wasn't planned. Dick Cavett had invited both men on the show, but nobody expected what would happen. The first 30 minutes had been cordial enough. Ali talked about his recent fights, his training, his plans for the future. Dean told stories from Hollywood, cracked jokes, kept things light, but you could feel it building. Every time Ali spoke, you could see Dean's jaw tighten slightly. Every time the Vietnam War was mentioned, the temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. Then Dick Cavett made what seemed like an innocent comment. He mentioned Ali's draft refusal, framing it as a matter of personal conscience. That's when Dean Martin leaned forward in his chair. His easy smile was gone. His eyes, usually half-lidded and amused, were sharp and focused. And when he spoke, his voice carried an edge that made everyone in the studio sit up straighter. "Can I say something here, Dick?" Dean's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Because I've been sitting here listening to Muhammad talk about conscience and principles, and I think somebody needs to say what millions of Americans are thinking." The studio went quiet. Ali turned to face Dean fully, his expression unreadable. "Go ahead," Ali said softly. "I'm listening." Dean Martin didn't hold back. What came next was one of the most direct, most brutal attacks ever delivered on live television. Not crude, not shouting, but devastating in its directness. "Muhammad, you've made millions of dollars in this country. You become one of the most famous men in the world because America gave you the opportunity. You've lived a life most people can't even dream of. And when your country asked you to serve, when your country needed you, you said no." Dean paused, letting that sink in. The audience was frozen. "I grew up in Steubenville, Ohio. My father was a barber. We didn't have much, but we understood something very simple. You take care of your country, and your country takes care of you. Men from my neighborhood, they didn't ask questions when they were drafted. They went. Some of them didn't come back. But they went because that's what you do. That's what being an American means." The attack intensified. Dean's voice grew more passionate, more personal. "You talk about conscience, Muhammad, but what about the conscience of the kids who are over there right now, fighting and dying while you're here living large? What about their families? What about the guys who didn't have expensive lawyers and fancy religious exemptions? What about the poor kids who couldn't dodge the draft because they were too busy trying to survive?" He pointed at Ali, the gesture sharp and accusatory. "You had a choice. You chose yourself over your country. And I'm sorry, but where I come from, we have a word for that. It's not conscientious objection. It's cowardice. It's betrayal. You can dress it up in all the religious talk you want, but at the end of the day, you put yourself first when your country needed you most. The studio audience was divided. Some applauded enthusiastically. Others sat in shocked silence. A few booed, but they were quickly drowned out. Dean wasn't done. And another thing that bothers me, Muhammad, you've made yourself into a symbol. Kids look up to you. And what are you teaching them? That when things get tough, when your country calls, you can just say no. That principles matter more than duty? That's a dangerous message. That's not the America I know. Dean sat back, his face flushed with emotion. He'd said what he came to say. The challenge had been issued. And now, 50 million Americans waited to see how Muhammad Ali would respond. Would he get angry? Would he fight back with the same verbal fury he'd shown so many opponents in the ring? Would this dissolve into a shouting match? Ali did none of those things. Instead, he smiled. Not a smug smile, not a mocking smile, but something sadder and wiser. He let the silence hang for a moment. Then he spoke in that distinctive voice, calm and measured. Dean, can I ask you something? Ali's tone was respectful, almost gentle. Have you ever been in a war? Have you ever had to kill somebody? Dean shifted in his seat. I've never served, no. I was too young for World War II's draft and too old for Korea. So you've never had to make that choice, Ali continued. You've never had a gun in your hand and orders to shoot another human being. You've never had to decide whether you could actually take a life. Is that right? That's right, Dean admitted. But that's not the point. It is the point, Ali interrupted gently. See, Dean, it's easy to talk about duty and service when you've never been in that position. It's easy to judge other men's courage when you've never been tested yourself. You made war movies, didn't you? I saw you in some of them. You played soldiers, heroes, tough guys who killed the enemy without a second thought. And America loved those movies. You got rich making them. Ali leaned forward, his eyes locked on Dean's. But those were just movies, weren't they? You gotta say, cut and go home. The blood wasn't real. The death wasn't real. You never had to live with actually taking a life. So I'm wondering, what gives you the right to call me a coward for refusing to do something you've never had the courage to do yourself? The question hung in the air like a bomb. You could see Dean processing it, see the defense forming on his lips. But Ali wasn't finished. And let's talk about these Hollywood patriots. How many of you made fortunes off World War II movies? How many of you played heroes and won awards for pretending to be brave? How many of you got rich glorifying war while other men's sons actually fought and died? Ali's voice grew stronger, more passionate. I'm not criticizing you for not serving, Dean. I'm not saying everyone has to fight. I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't judge a man who's actually been put in that position and made a choice based on his deepest beliefs. Then Ali shifted gears, and what came next would become one of the defining statements of the entire Vietnam era. You want to know about courage, Dean? Let me tell you what courage is. Courage isn't doing what's easy or popular or expected. Courage is standing by your principles when the whole world is against you. Courage is losing everything, your title, your money, your reputation, your freedom, rather than violate your conscience. Ali's voice was steady, but his intensity was undeniable. I didn't dodge the draft because I was scared of fighting. I'm a boxer. I fight for a living. You think I'm afraid of physical combat? I refuse because my religion teaches me that killing is wrong. Because the Quran says, do not take a life that Allah has made sacred except by way of justice and law. He continued, building his case with the precision of a lawyer and the passion of a preacher. My teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, taught me that I have no quarrel with those Viet Cong. No Viet Cong ever called me a racial slur. No Vietnamese ever denied me a hotel room because of my skin color. No one from Vietnam ever made me sit in the back of a bus or drink from a separate water fountain. The audience was completely silent now. Even those who disagreed with Ali were listening. You talk about what America has given me, Dean, and you're right, I've been blessed. But let's talk about what America has taken from me and people who look like me. My ancestors were brought here in chains. They built this country with their labor and got nothing but brutality in return. My parents couldn't vote in Kentucky when I was growing up. I couldn't eat in certain restaurants. I couldn't sleep in certain hotels. Ali's voice carried no anger, just a profound sadness and truth. You want me to go halfway around the world and kill poor people who never did anything to me, to fight for freedoms that I don't fully have here at home? You want me to risk my life for a country that won't even let me live as a full citizen? And when I say no, when I say I can't do that in good conscience, you call me a coward? He looked directly at Dean Martin, and there was something in his eyes that made it impossible to look away. True courage, Dean, is not blindly following orders. True courage is standing up and saying, "This is wrong, and I won't participate, even if it costs me everything." And it has cost me everything. My title, 3.5 years of my career, millions of dollars, my reputation, the possibility of prison. But I can look at myself in the mirror. Can everyone who calls me a coward say the same? Ali paused, then delivered the knockout blow. You know what the real difference is between you and me, Dean? When you made those war movies, you were pretending to have courage. When I refused a draft, I was actually showing it. Because it takes no courage at all to do what everyone expects. It takes no courage to follow the crowd. It takes no courage to profit from war while other people's children fight it. But it takes enormous courage to stand alone, to lose everything, to face prison rather than violate your deepest beliefs. That's courage, Dean. And I'm sorry if you can't see it, but history will. History will remember that I stood for something when it cost me everything. What will history remember about you? The silence that followed was absolute. You could see Dean Martin struggling, his face working through emotions, anger, defensiveness, but also something else. Doubt, recognition, the uncomfortable realization that Ali had flipped the script entirely. Dean had come into this expecting to deliver a patriotic lecture, to put Ali in his place, to speak for Heartland America. Instead, he'd been challenged in ways he wasn't prepared for. When Dean finally spoke, his voice had lost its earlier certainty. Muhammad, I understand you believe what you're saying. I just think sometimes we have duties that go beyond our personal beliefs. But it sounded weak now, almost rehearsed. The fire was gone. Ali had done something remarkable. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't insulted. He hadn't played the victim. Instead, he calmly, methodically, brilliantly dismantled every argument Dean had made. He'd turned the accusation of cowardice back on itself. He'd exposed the contradictions in the pro-war position. He'd forced Dean and America to confront uncomfortable questions about race, about duty, about what courage really means. The audience reaction was split, but telling. Some sat in uncomfortable silence. Others applauded, and the applause grew louder, more sustained. You could feel the momentum in the room shifting. Dick Cavett, master host that he was, tried to lighten the mood, but there was no undoing what had just happened. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a moment of moral reckoning, broadcast live to 50 million Americans. The aftermath of that confrontation was seismic. The next morning, newspapers across the country led with the story. Ali and Dean Martin clash on live TV. Editorial pages exploded with opinions. Some praised Dean for saying what needed to be said. Others condemned him for attacking Ali. But most focused on Ali's response, on the power and logic of his arguments, on the grace with which he defended himself. Within weeks, the cultural conversation around Ali began to shift. He'd always had supporters, but now even some of his critics were forced to reckon with his arguments. You couldn't dismiss him as a coward anymore, not after watching him calmly dismantle those accusations on live television. You couldn't call him unpatriotic without confronting the uncomfortable questions he'd raised about what patriotism means for Black Americans. And then just a few months later, on June 28, 1971, the Supreme Court delivered its ruling in a unanimous 8-0 decision. The court overturned Ali's conviction for draft evasion. The legal basis was technical, but the message was clear. Muhammad Ali had been right all along. His religious objection was legitimate. His conscientious stance was valid. The government had wrongly prosecuted him. Ali got his boxing license back. He got his freedom. He got his vindication. And while it didn't erase the years he'd lost or the money he'd missed, It confirmed what he'd been saying all along. Standing by your principles, even when the cost is enormous, can be the right choice. Dean Martin never publicly addressed the confrontation again. He didn't apologize, didn't recant his position. But those close to him reported that the exchange had affected him more than he let on. According to some accounts, he watched the tape of the show multiple times, sitting alone in his home, wrestling with Ali's arguments. Years later, a friend of Dean's would recall him saying, "I still don't know if Ali was right or wrong, but I'll tell you this, he had more guts standing up for what he believed than most of us have in our whole bodies." It wasn't a full admission, but it was something. It was the acknowledgement that moral courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the people we're quickest to judge might be braver than we are. The story of that confrontation transcends the two men involved. It captures a moment when America was forced to reckon with fundamental questions about duty, conscience, race, and what it means to be courageous. Dean Martin represented one America, traditional, patriotic, believing in service and sacrifice, and supporting your country even when you disagree. Muhammad Ali represented another America, questioning, principled, insisting that true patriotism sometimes means standing against your government when your government is wrong. Both men were sincere. Both believed they were right. But only one of them was willing to lose everything for his beliefs. Only one of them faced actual consequences. And only one of them changed history. Muhammad Ali emerged from that confrontation not through physical dominance, but through moral clarity. He showed that you can be strong without being violent, that you can defend yourself without attacking others, that the most powerful weapon isn't a fist or a gun, but truth delivered with conviction and grace. The real shock wasn't the confrontation itself. The real shock was watching Ali in real time transform from a controversial figure into a moral leader. It was watching him take the worst attacks his critics could muster and turn them into a teaching moment. It was seeing him refuse to be diminished, refuse to be angry, refuse to play the role his detractors expected. 50 million people tuned in expecting a spectacle. What they got was a masterclass in dignity, in rhetoric, in standing alone when standing alone is the hardest thing in the world to do. That's what makes this moment unforgettable. Not the drama, not the celebrity clash, but the demonstration of what true courage looks like when it's tested on the largest possible stage. Dean Martin thought he was confronting a draft dodger. Instead, he encountered something far more formidable, a man who knew who he was, what he believed, and why he believed it. A man who'd already paid the price for his principles and would do it again without hesitation. In the end, history rendered its verdict. Muhammad Ali is remembered as one of the greatest champions, not just in boxing, but in the fight for justice and human dignity. His refusal to fight in Vietnam is now seen by most Americans as courageous, principled, and right. The confrontation with Dean Martin on the Dick Cavett Show is remembered as the moment when Ali's moral authority became undeniable, when even his harshest critics had to acknowledge the power of his conviction. September 24th, 1971. The night 50 million people watched Dean Martin confront Muhammad Ali on live television. The night Ali didn't just defend himself, he educated a nation. The night that proved moral courage can defeat moral certainty. That's a performance worth remembering.